So welcome everyone to Montic. It's lovely to see all of you. I think most of them are new members. I haven't seen a lot of these faces. Um, we're just going to do like a 10-minute introduction of what Montic does. If you came here without knowing what Montic does, I don't know how you end up being here, but welcome. We are student-run cybersecurity club, and we host workshops that teach practical cybersecurity techniques and industry knowledge as well. That's something we started doing in the recent years. So, with the comments. And sometimes we also compete in our CTF team. We will explain that later. And also, we were founded in 2014, and this actually marks a 10th year anniversary for us. So, hooray! Our committee members this year is myself as the president, Sarah, who was talking just now, as a vice president. I think we have Oscar just gone out of the room right now, yeah. And Rohit, that tall dude over there, is the media and communications officer. Jamie or James over there, he's not here today, unfortunately, but he does secretary at Monsec. And we have Danny as the treasurer. I think Michael is not here as well. He is the system admin for our club. Hi, Preeti. Sorry.
The member training officer, yeah.
Equal time treasurer like I did.
Oh, Danny is not a treasurer. He's an outreach person. He's a treasurer. That's our treasurer. So this semester, we have around 30 events in total. That's quite a jump from last year. We only had 12 and a little bit more than that. And in these 30 events, we're going to do a weekly workshop on different things like web application hacking and binary exploitation, reverse engineering, and all that. If you don't know what these terms mean, it's okay. We want to teach you. We aim our workshop to be beginner friendly. Anyways, we also have talks from the industry people. So today was meant to be that day, but we unfortunately didn't have the speaker coming properly. We also have special events sometimes. This mid-semester, we're planning to do quite an in-depth workshop that's going to last about half a day. And we also have an annual Monsec Beginner CTF. And also we might have a 10th anniversary event this year as well. So what these weekly workshops are, for every Monday, we're going to have this thing called a Masterclass. So that's the one year coming right now. It's meant to be us inviting industry professionals to talk about a industry insight or deliver a workshop on their enterprise applications, for example. Now, every Wednesday, we have this thing called Homebrew, and this is our own curriculum built by Monsec and presented by our committee members. And we also have Friday Night of Hacking, which is a little bit more casual style workshop we have at the Discord server. It's just taking a little bit of casual time in Discord, talking about hacking things, or we just go through a hacking platform and just walk through that together. So I mentioned capture the flag multiple times. What the hell is a CTF? It's basically a gamified security competition. It's basically a security version of a hackathon. It's where participants solve challenges to find this flag that's usually like hidden from the system. You try to get privileged access to something to get that flag, or you try to find obfuscated flag inside a code, for example. And this topic can be anything from cryptography and web security and all that. And as you see, you might see some overlap with our content, and that's because our workshops will help you learn and prepare for these competitions. Apparently, Monsec used to be quite like first or second in Australia as a student team, but we haven't played a lot this year. So hopefully we can get back to speed on that this year. Some of the major ones are Pico CTF. That's quite a famous beginner-friendly one. So in the 2024 one, it's going to be at March. So if you guys are interested, I definitely recommend you to play in the Pico CTF. We also have Down Under CTF, which is Australia's biggest CTF. One of the organizers actually is ex-Monsec committee, so that's kind of interesting. And these CTF competitions, it actually runs almost every single weekend. So you don't have too much. You don't have enough. No, you have too much CTF competition to join. The Mosaic Beginner CTF are, as the name suggests, our capture the flag competitions for beginners and newcomers in Mosaic. And we provide prizes as well. And it's a great opportunity for you to be familiar with the CTF challenges and challenges and just making new friends along the way. We have a couple of social medias and important links that you can visit to. We have a hyperlink to all of them at mosaic.io/links, or we have a URL shortener starting with go.mosaic.io. So whenever you see that, you can type that in and it will redirect you to whatever website that you point to. One of the major ones that we want to emphasize is YouTube, where we upload all the archived workshops. So all these workshops are recorded and eventually will be uploaded to YouTube. Discord is our main communication channel, so I do recommend you join that later. And it's also where we do our Friday night of hacking as well. And we have Instagram as well, where we meme around and have fun. And there, we also post event announcements there, but we started to do more meme stuff for some reason. Onto the fun part, I'm just going to hand over to Sarah right there, who's better at talking than me, to do the intro to Blue Team Ming. So I'll hand over to her.
Hello. Yes, I am indeed Sarah. Thanks, Yuki, for the wonderful start to the workshop. Give him attention. He hates it. Anyway, so as you notice, I'm not an industry expert. However, I do work at a cybersecurity firm called Promethic, who are also one of our sponsors. I'm a cybersecurity intern there. And while I specialize in offensive security, I also do have exposure to blue teaming, which is defensive security. So to start with, has anyone ever heard the terms red team, blue team, purple team? Anyone? Got some hands up. Yep. So for everyone online, for people who didn't hear, basically the blue team is the defensive one. They are the ones who are going to be creating the systems and are going to be defending against attacks, whether by simulated attacks from the red team, who are the offensive team, or from actual threat actors. So today we are going to cover a number of topics, including, as you see on there, what is blue teaming? What kind of roles are in blue teaming, what type of work is performed, what skills are needed, and what's this DFIR stuff, which is a special domain of blue teaming, which I'll be focusing on tonight, as it's sort of the most interactive one and makes for the best kind of workshop. So for people who've never heard of blue teaming before, as we mentioned, it is defensive cybersecurity. And there's a few key elements and domains. These are elements that I've sort of grouped them into. If you look at other people at different websites, they'll group it in different ways, because I think with a lot of cybersecurity, in fact, the boundaries aren't hard and fast. There's no, yep, this is definitely the role of the offensive team. This is definitely the defensive team. There is definitely a lot of blurring of the boundaries, because that's just the nature of cybersecurity. It's really hard to put things in neat little boxes and neat little categories, because everything is changing, firstly, and also just the nature of the landscape is everything interacts with each other, meaning it's very hard to segregate them. However, we do have some rough areas we can divide blue teaming into. So we have this thing called governance, risk and compliance, or GRC for short, and their focus is on standardization and on policy. So I'm sure many of you will be familiar with standards like ISO 27001, which is a information security standard, and they'll also be familiar with a number of laws such as privacy laws and GDPR, for example. And it's GRC's job to make sure that the company is up to scratch, so that make sure that they follow those prescribed rules and that they are obeying the policy. Threat intelligence is about being aware. So knowing what kind of attacks are out there, knowing who's being targeted, knowing what kind of actors are active at the moment. Security engineering is about preparation and creation. So managing systems, creating secure systems. So think of people who spend their time hardening systems, for example, which means making it more secure. The Security Operations Center, or SOC for short, focuses on detection. So as soon as an attack happens, the SOC will be able to pick it up and forward it and respond to it quickly. And that passes to the job of incident response, whose job is to react to an attack. So there's a whole separate workflow that they'll go through when they respond to an attack, and I'll go through that later. That's sort of a rough outline. There's also a rough structure for a blue team workflow. So as you know, red teams who do offensive security have what we call an attack chain, a very structured path of steps where you go reconnaissance, and then you find the exploits, you exploit the vulnerabilities, you escalate your permissions, you exfiltrate the data, you live off the land, etc., etc. Blue teaming doesn't have anything that's quite as rigid, just because of the nature of it. However, again, you can roughly categorize it into preparing for attacks, monitoring for any unusual activity, detecting an attack, responding to the attack, containing it so it doesn't damage other systems, eradicating it, restoring the system to as it was before, and reviewing the protocols to ensure that kind of attack doesn't happen again. As I highlighted on this slide, you can see that we'll be focusing on the DFIR side, which is the SOC and the incident response team, because it's a bit hard to do GRC and it's also very boring. Anyway, a bit more in depth. As I said before, GRC is primarily concerned with policy and law. A lot of the time, they will simply be reviewing company policy and making sure that lines up with other standards and regulations. I've listed some examples here that apply to Australia. So the Privacy Act 1988, Commonwealth legislation that stipulates how data must be used and stored within Australia. And then we also have things outside of legislation, so standards and regulations, like I said before, ISO 27001 and the GDPR, which is the EU's privacy regulations, and it's actually very strict, and it's become sort of the gold standard for privacy regulation. The role of threat intelligence here is really to get as much knowledge as possible, because I'm sure you would all know that it's really hard to defend a system against the unknown. If you don't know what's out there, you can't prepare for it well. And so threat intelligence specialists will spend a lot of time researching and keeping an eye out for what's going on in the world. There's also multiple categories of threat intelligence, and they're categorized into 4 groups, which is strategic, tactical, operational, and technical. So strategic intelligence really focuses on non-technical skills, so things that would apply to policy. So for example, a strategic level might be, at the moment, we are seeing a lot of companies like us being targeted by ransomware. Therefore, we should take steps to protect against ransomware. Very high level, not technical at all. Below that, you've got tactical, which is sort of like the current state of attack and defense. Are we seeing a rise in a particular kind of vulnerability? Are we seeing defenders responding with a certain thing that's not working? What do we need to change? Where's the balance at currently? Operational is information on a specific ongoing attack. So for example, it's just been detected and they've said, hey, we've detected this attack. It's looking like it's this kind of thing. What do we know about it? And then threat intelligence will look into it and say, okay, from what we know, these kind of attacks tend to be followed by X, Y, and Z. We should respond with A, B, and C. And the last level is technical threat intelligence, which is basically evidence of attack, also known as indicators of compromise. So things that the DFIR team might flag as being suspicious, then goes to threat intelligence and they go, hey, this kind of reminds us of this thing we saw back in this attack. We should be careful. On the bottom there, I've got security engineering. Security engineering is a little bit hard to categorize because it contains so many different things. It's sort of like the everything else box. You build and maintain systems is sort of the broadest way I can put it. So it really, really depends on what the company is doing, what data they're working with, what systems they have in place, and that job will vary greatly depending on the product that's being worked on. But here's what we'll be focusing on today. Hello. The SOC and IR teams, yes, I merged them together because they are really, really similar because they work together on this thing called digital forensics and incident response, which I've been calling DFIR for short. It's a really, really important area of blue teaming, and it's probably the one that people are most familiar with. We're going to look into more detail. And I just like to point out, before anyone gets freaked out, there's like a lot of tools in defense and security. You've got your classic seams like, CrowdStrike and Splunk, but then, we throw in some more scanning tools. We have Nmap over there, for example. And by the way, we still have more, and that goes on forever. Because I know one thing that really scares people about cybersecurity is that they go, oh, there's so many tools you've got to use. You've got to use like this one and this one and this one, this one. I'll make sure you've got this installed and have this ready. It looks a bit like a mess, and in the end, it's true. There are a lot of tools, particularly for blue teaming, I find more than red teaming. However, you don't need to freak out if you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many, I don't know which one to use, because a lot of it comes with time. And it's like having a giant toolbox. And at the start, you'll have like no idea what to use it for. It's like, do I use a screwdriver? Do I need a hammer? But as you go and as you go through these problems and you see actual examples, you start going, I need a tool that can do this. Then you can search up tools that have that particular functionality. And there'll be a lot that do sort of similar things, like Kibana and Autopsy here are roughly in the same category. And so it's through practice and through using it that you realize which tool is appropriate for different scenarios. So never feel overwhelmed by the fact that like you've never heard of any of these, because as you go, you will get to use them. As you use them, you will get to know them, and you can sort of pick it up one by one, and then you can build a little repertoire of tools that you are familiar with. All right. Now on to the actual explanation of DFIR. So digital forensics is sort of like its normal forensic science counterpart, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, particularly if you're fans of like detective stuff. There is a rough workflow that they follow: recovery, investigation, preservation, analysis, and reporting, which is fairly straightforward. You don't really want to tamper with the evidence as you have it. So you want to preserve that as best you can. Typical things a digital forensics team will look at. So these are the kind of, because when I said before, we want to monitor the systems. What does that really mean? What are they really looking at? What are they trying to do? Here's some examples of that. So file system forensics checks for sign of compromise. So for example, if you're let's say a social media system and you've got all this user data stored and suddenly you start seeing a whole bunch of users being created with the same name and date of birth, that might be really suspicious. And you might see files that are changing suddenly or are disappearing from the record. That could be a sign of a compromise. Memory forensics, indications of attack, similar thing again, but instead of looking at individual files, you're looking at an entire storage center or something, or an entire server, or something that has data in, essentially. Network forensics, I know we have people in here who are big fans of Wireshark. It's looking at network activity. And so essentially you look at traffic on a network. So maybe if you are, I don't know, if you're a monitor administrator and suddenly you see a lot of packets going out to somewhere and like a really unexpected place and there's a lot of traffic going out there, that might be flagged as suspicious, and you might start wondering, why is there so much stuff going out of the system? And so you could look into that. And then one that we'll be actually using tonight is log analysis. So looking back at records of activity and then seeing if there's anything that isn't really standard practice. So for example, if you're looking at a log of a computer system that has sensitive data and you notice that like the cleaner has logged on and has downloaded a bunch of stuff, that log would be an indicator of suspicious activity, because, why would a cleaner have access to a bunch of sensitive information? With digital forensics, what's really key is knowledge. The more you know about an attack, or the more information you have access to about your system, the more likely you are to be able to stop an attack and to actually respond to it. Because if you're only half sure that something, something may have gone wrong with this server, or it might be on this one, or it might actually just be normal activity, it's really hard to formulate a plan to respond to it if you're not really sure of what it does. The other half of DFIR is, of course, the IR side, which is incident response. And their job is to get information from the digital forensics team, go, yep, that is indeed an attack, we don't like it. They then have to contain it to reduce its impact and then eventually eradicate the threat. So as I mentioned there, they work really, really closely with the SOC team, who are the detections team, essentially. As I've written there as well, containment can be long and short term. So you may have heard they'll say, oh, when this system was attacked, they had to take half the system down. And the reason they do that is to prevent the attack from damaging more systems. Because if you imagine the attack is like a worm that travels between machines, if you can shut down your unaffected network, you can stop it from spreading, and you can effectively create a barrier between your infected systems and your uninfected systems, which helps mitigate that damage and therefore makes restoration easier, and also allows the business to keep running without disruption, which is really, really important. Business continuity is one of the things that the blue team is really aiming to protect, because it's like the most important part of the business. Some solutions that can be done is take a system offline or isolate parts of a network, depending on what the situation is. And here, eradication depends on the threat. So if we consider something like a piece of ransomware, if you want to eradicate that threat, you would probably have to either find a way to decrypt it or remove it while preserving the data. If you're looking at something like a virus, you'd be wanting to find any remnants of it on a system and remove them gradually using like an antivirus tool or just manual combing, depending on the situation. And one thing that does freak out people about incident response is, once again, the acronyms. There's a whole bunch of different tools here, each with slightly different functions, and I'll just go through them. I'll go through them super quickly. So a SIEM, I don't know how people say it. I call it a SIEM, which is a security information and event management, basically collects a whole bunch of data. So if you've got an email client over here, a website over here, a mobile app over here, it takes all the information from that, logs, networks, files, all of that, chucks it into a big thing, grinds it all together and says, Here's a recent report of the activity, nothing unusual detected. A SAW is a little bit different. It is sort of like a defined workflow. So in the event that X happens, do Y. And where possible, it will generally try to automate that response. So if it says, you know, if we detect a file has been moved off the system, automatically shut down the system, something like that, just to make security experts' lives a little bit easier. The next one is an EDR, which is automatic end user protection. So for example, if you're on one of the computers in the library, just at Monash, if you accidentally download a virus, it might automatically flag that and delete it. And that'll be an example of an EDR. I don't know how to say this one. UEBA is designed to analyze behavior. So rather than looking at files itself and the metadata and the status of the system, it looks at the behavior of the users. So maybe it notices that, you know, this person normally logs in from their home in, say, Burwood, but today they're logging in from Springvale. And that could be considered unusual behavior, because why would they be doing that? And it can pick up things like that and use a lot of algorithms and machine learning to determine if it should be treated as suspicious or not. And the last one on there is an ASM, which is sort of like a SIEM, but it's specifically targeted at discovering attacks. That's all like continuous scanning, continuous checking, just to make sure that there's nothing slipping past the defenses. Cool. Now it's enough of me talking. Tonight we'll be using this platform called Blue Team Labs Online. I'm pretty sure most people won't already have an account. However, it is free to create one. So if you guys want to hop on your devices and create an account now, I have tried to choose challenges that don't require additional tooling. So don't worry if you don't have like a VM set up or if you've never done it before. It's just going to be, as I said before, a lot of focus on log analysis and document analysis. So you can have a bit of time pretending to be Sherlock Holmes, essentially. Yeah, I'll just give you, also people online, you can do this as well. I will go and do a walkthrough of all of these, but for now, if everyone just wants to get an account, I will just say, because of the nature of Blue Team Labs Online, we can only solve what they call retired labs because it is in live leaderboard. They don't really want people sharing the answers to questions when it's still a live challenge. So we'll just be going through a couple of their older retired challenges today. And as you can see, I've put up some brief descriptions there if you want to get ahead. But don't worry if you have no experience. I'll give you guys some time to try yourself, and then I will go through all of them and explain how we get to the solution. So I will stop talking now for about 5 minutes, and then we'll get started. All right, I'm back here. Sorry. For people who can't find where it is, I'm going to do it in Chrome. Never mind. Blue Team Labs Online. That is the name of the platform. They can see the URL. And basically you just log in. I'm going to pause my share while I type my password in. I'm cyber secure. So once you make an account, this is sort of what you'll see. If you can just head to the challenges tab up here, and then we click on retired because I'm sharing solutions with you, so I can't use any live challenges today. As I said before, the first challenge is going to be a lot of reading. Is anyone here has never used command line before, has no idea what the command line is? It's okay if you haven't. That's okay. I'll just warn you, the first challenge might be a little bit tricky, but give it your best shot. I personally found that the best way to learn anything with computer science is just to do it, even if you know absolutely nothing about it. I will go through all of these. So just give it your best shot, and then I'll do a walkthrough. So the first challenge is called Log Analysis Privilege Escalation. If I'm going too fast, put your hands up, by the way, I will slow down. Which is this one here, CTF like easy 10 points. And if we read the description here, it says a server with sensitive data was accessed by an attacker and the files posted on underground forum. However, the DF team, so the digital forensics team, has managed to capture the history. So the log history, or they put the bash history actually. So you can see the commands the attacker put into the system. And from that, we're going to answer some of these questions that they've given us. So these are questions that a typical DFIR team will want to answer. So what user was responsible, what script did the attacker try to use, what packet analyzer tool did the attacker try to use, what file extension was used to bypass the file upload filter, and what kind of what kind of attack was used to gain access in the first place. So it's this, I probably can't say this, but anyway, this is basically reading comprehension for hackers. So, you know, forget your, which school did so-and-so go to? We're now doing reading comprehension for hackers. I will admit, when I did this challenge, I was like, oh yeah, this isn't too bad. Then there's some of the later ones and I was like, that escalated quickly. But for people who are struggling a bit, my hint is even if you've never touched Linux before, never used a command line, just do a quick Google search of common Linux commands, like top 10 Linux commands, and that'll give you an idea of what normal looks like. Then when you see things that aren't in that list, you can go, hold on a second, I've never heard of that. And the great thing about these challenges is you can Google it. I guarantee you, even real like blue teamers will Google stuff all the time. If anything just looks kind of out of place, or you've got like a gut feeling that it doesn't look quite right, Google it, look it up, see if it's anything unusual. And also when doing log analysis, Control F is your friend. You don't have time to read through everything sometimes. Control F, take a guess, see what sticks. If you have finished that challenge and you would like to get ahead on the next challenge, which is a little bit more involved, it is called the Planet's Prestige. So if you finish early, you can move on to the next one. That's all good. So my screen is still alive. I'm going to download this file and unzip it. Oh yeah, the password for all of these is just BTLO. So unzip it. Cool. So that's just the README. If we open the bash history, I'm going to open it. Hello. Open with Visual Studio's code. Okay, so if we look at this at first glance, for those who are not familiar with the command, it's like, what in the nine hells is this? So there's a whole bunch of commands here, and we want to find a few pieces of information. So we have a flick through, okay, we've got a rough idea of what's going on. They're creating a file, they're trying to open it, they're uploading a bunch of files, they're listing what's in there, finding the directory. Fairly standard. We can see some unusual lines here. So line 32 is a little bit unusual. So wget, for those who don't know, retrieves a file from a URL. We have them trying to open the sudo as file, and we have them trying to look for specific files. So those are all a bit interesting to us, so might flag them suspicious. But let's look at what the first question is. What user other than root is present on the server? So if we jump back here, to find the users, we'll be wanting to look at the directory. So if we scroll down here, line 21, we see /home/Daniel. So anything that's after home is like the user name. So we now know that the other user is Daniel. What script did the attacker try to download to the server? So as I mentioned before, wget is the command that is used to retrieve files from a URL. So for example, if you want to download a file, you can go wget mywebsite.com/this file. So if you look out for wget, again, Command F, hello, there it is down the bottom. We can see that they've tried to grab something off this Git account essentially, and the file they're trying to grab off here is called linuxexploitsuggester.sh, which is going to be a bash script. So this is the name of the file they tried to download. So we can copy this and paste it into here. So that's the script they tried to download. What packet analyzer tool did the attacker try to use? Now, as I was saying to some other people, even if you aren't familiar with all the tools that are available, you can still take a pretty good guess. So if they're trying to use it, they're going to be using it as a command. So it's going to be one of these first words. So if you go through these, if you recall your top 10 Linux commands, none of these really stand out. Python, su, ls, cd, all very standard, env, dpkg, and then we come across this thing down the bottom, which is tcp dump. Now, the two things that make it suspicious is firstly, it's not a standard function. It's not really something you just execute in your home shell normally. And secondly, it has the words TCP in it. For those of you who have done networking or are familiar with networking, TCP, of course, will scream out to you as packets. So that will immediately come up as unusual. As TCP dump. So we can say that that is the packet analyzer tool they tried to use. There is our answer. One thing that someone did tell me is that, like, what the heck is cron tab? That also sounds very suspicious. Cron tab is actually a regular Linux command that's used to schedule specific tasks and commands. It's that cron is from like, Chronos time, not anything else. Cool. Now we start getting a little bit tricky. What file extension did the attacker use to bypass the upload filter implemented by the developer? So firstly, we want to find the file. And the only times you really see files being uploaded is the first one over here, where we're trying to retrieve the Linux exploiter file. And we look down the bottom, there's also a second file that's here as well, which is x.phtml. So phtml is a bit suspicious to us. It's not really a standard file extension. And there's no real other files it can be, because we know this one is the exploit they tried to download. So we're going to put this one in, this one, .phtml. And now the last one is actually quite tricky. Yes, you could just guess it through, but it is a little bit easier if you know the types of attacks here. So a reverse shell is when you basically go into another system and try to create your own shell into it, so you can take over and kind of, do an reverse card on the shell. A file upload is basically abusing a system's ability to upload files. So, if you have a new user account, it might say upload a picture of yourself here. And if you upload a malicious script instead of a picture, that would be a file upload attack. File write is, of course, manipulating the contents of a file to do something that it's not intended to do. Suid is it's a Linux thing, basically, where when you run a command or a specific executable, you are granted the permissions of that original creator. So, for example, if you had this amazing Python script called myamazingpythonscript.py, had suid on it, that would mean you would gain the permissions of the creator when you ran that file. And while that can be useful in some circumstances, it can also be ripe for exploitation, because if you imagine that creator was an administrator user, suddenly you've briefly granted your user administrative privileges, which isn't great. The last one is library load, essentially poisoning a library or using a malicious library. Now, if we look at the logs, you might initially think that we're doing a file upload, because we have this, this weird file in the uploads folder called x.phtml. However, the key part here is before removing the PHP shell, what misconfiguration was exploited? So it wasn't that file upload vulnerability, because that was used afterwards. So you needed to get that initial exploit. And what really is kind of like an unusual flag to us is this line over here, line 61. Though you might say, okay, it looks pretty standard. What's unusual about it? It's unusual because of these two flags here, perm 4000. So in this case, the attacker is saying, find me all files, so type F, where the user's root, with permission 4000. So even if you didn't know what this was, you could do a quick Google search, Linux permission 4000, what is it? Because you'll discover that Linux is basically coded a bunch of different numbers for different levels of permissions, and 4000 happens to be the suid permission. So they'll say, this permission is the permission of whoever created it. And so that screams to us, that's something unusual with the suid. We should flag that. And in fact, it is subsequently followed by the upload of that Python shell, which was created back here. So a shell was spawned on line 27, but it wasn't until line 62 that it was actually used and triggered. So we can conclude that it was indeed this particular line that led to the creation of the exploit and allowed the hacker or the malicious threat actor to upload that file and exploit the file upload vulnerability. So we can conclude that based on the commands run, it was a suid vulnerability that was used. Option number 4. Hooray! We've completed one room. What is... So this is a bit of our warm-up, our beginning blue teaming, really practicing those log analysis skills. The next challenge we're going to do is a little bit more involved, as I said before, and you're going to have to do a bit of thinking outside the box. Once again, I encourage you guys, just Google stuff. Don't actually Google the walkthrough, that kind of defeats the purpose of it, but Google things you find in it. So anything that seems a bit out of the blue to you, Google it, look it up, talk to your friends, see if you guys can work together to find the solution. So the next one we're doing is, again, if you go to that challenges retired page, it's called the Planet's Prestige. Some princess, I think it was. Yeah, a princess got kidnapped or something, and they've sent this ransom email. And you have to find clues as to where the princess is based on the email and answer a number of questions. This one is a little bit longer, and I believe we are having food in about 15 to 20 minutes. What I might do is I might let you guys work on this until food comes. I'll walk around the room and help you guys as we go. And then after food arrives, I'll do the walkthrough. But we'll see how we go for time. For this particular one, I'm just going to show you a little trick here because it might confuse a lot of people. If you go again, download that file, which is this one here, extract it, use the same password. We can say it comes up as a .eml. People on Windows, Outlook will immediately try to open it. People on Mac, I've got no idea. I don't use Mac. If you open it with Outlook, which is what it wants to do. Oh, by the way, it will not open on the new version of Outlook, only the old version of Outlook. We can see that we get this lovely little email message saying, hi, the major on Earth, the abducted Kokandians, oh, I get it, are with me, including the president's daughter. They are safe in a secret location. Pay me stuff, otherwise you won't get it. And they have left us a little clue which says, don't trust your eyes. And there's actually a PDF inside of here as well. There is no actual malware in this challenge. In some of the other labs, they have active, like legitimate malware in them. So I would say don't download it. But in this particular case, the PDF is safe to download. There's nothing on this one. It's not an active challenge. In fact, if we download it now, we can see that, I'm just going to put it in my downloads folder. If we open this one, we can see that something's a bit unusual about it because when we try to open it, we get an error. So it isn't malware. This is intentional. Give people a hint if people are stuck at the start. Once you open the email on an email client, you will see, firstly, that there's a fairly regular email. Download the PDF now and then close it. There's no more information you can gain from just looking at this email. Instead, what you want to do is open the email as either a text file or if you've got a code editor handy, open it in a code editor. That will allow you to see a lot more detail that the email client will normally hide from you. Things like who it's been sent from, whether there's any spoofing going on, what kind of domains are being used, all of which are questions that you'll want to answer. So have a go opening up in a text editor or a code editor, whichever you prefer, whatever you have. Like I said before, I have chosen this challenge because it doesn't require a lot of additional tooling. So you don't need to have a Kali VM ready. You don't need to have a whole bunch of stuff ready to go. The only tools that you will need in this one is, okay, mild spoilers, Microsoft Excel, and a file type identifier, which you can just Google file type identifier and upload the file there and get the answer just fine. Alternatively, for you Linux users, you can just do file and then use it that way. But besides that, that's all you need. I'm doing the walkthrough now. All right, if we open this up, we've had the email. We looked at the email and there was nothing unusual on it except for this little PDF, which I'm just going to move over here. However, if we try to open the PDF, it'll say an error has occurred, something is wrong. Now, there are numerous reasons why this occurs. However, I did rule out the existence of malware. So it really limits it to 2 or 3 things, which we can check very easily. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm going to open this email in a text editor or code editor. This allows us to see a whole bunch of hidden metadata that is not ordinarily visible if you open it in an email client. So let's see what the first thing they want us to find. The first thing they want us to find is the domain used by the malicious actor. Now, if you look at the email, you might get tricked by the fact it comes from a company called MicroApple. However, with emails, the address that appears is not always the address being used because you can do something called spoofing, basically where you say, use this ID and pretend I'm sending it from here, but actually use this server. So if we look at this, not that, this, and we scroll down, we can see a whole bunch of different stuff related to SMTP. Don't worry if you don't know anything, because we can just focus on these things at the start. We scroll down, we scroll down, we scroll down. We can see something interesting here. Here is us, the major on earth at gmail.com. What else have we got here? Mime content. Here's the MicroApple. However, if we look at the actual received, so where did it come from? Even though the return path says build jobs at MicroApple, we can see it's actually coming from this thing called mk.cz, which is the actual domain being used, which is then being spoofed through MicroApple. The reply to email address, we can just go reply to, and it'll come up here. Clearly, this does not match the actual email. So the email they are sending it from is not the email that it's actually going to return to. So we're going to take this one and put in here. The file type of the received attachment. So the file it's referring to, can everyone still see? Yes, good. Is this one, which is the PDF that won't open. To me, a file that won't open indicates that the file type isn't correct. So if you're on Linux, you can just do file, the file type. I'm not currently on Linux, so I'm going to go file type identifier online and use the power of the internet to do it for me. If I take this, drop it in here, we can check the file type, and it tells us it's actually a zip file, not a PDF, it is a zip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the extension from PDF to .zip. Yes, it will change it because now when I extract all of this, I get a folder with 2 files and an Excel spreadsheet. So let's go back to here firstly. What is the file type? It was a .zip. What is the name of the malicious actor? So we could look through all of these and find the name. However, if we open them up, we will see that there is in fact nothing which would suggest the name of the actor. However, if you create a file on your file system, it will mark you down as the author. And we can actually use something called metadata to check who the author is. Now, because I am conscious of time and the fact that I am at 24% and this computer is not great, I'm just going to skip to it and say PDF metadata viewer, because I happen to know it's in the PDF. If you didn't know it's in the PDF, what you can do is go through the metadata of all 3 files and see if anything comes up. However, in this particular case, what are you doing? Oh, batteries. Thank you. I have power now. No, I don't. I have power now. Thank you, Oscar. Okay, so I can grab the PDF file from here. Okay, let's try that again. I can go into here, come into here. Good job, Major. .pdf. So now I can actually open it properly and I can see that he's written yet another ransom note, money here, please. What I can do is I'll go into here, grab it, upload it. That's not uploading it. Thanks, let's try that again. I missed. Good job, Major. Okay, never mind. Browse. Good job, Major. Read PDF metadata. Again, this can be done on Linux, but I understand that everyone uses Linux. And right up the top, we have the author of the PDF, which is Pestero, I guess. We can copy his name and put it into here. What is the location of the attack in the universe? Hands up, who got this? Good. If you didn't get this, you probably overthought it because it was so ludicrously simple, even Yuki didn't get it. I will call him out like this because it was deeply amusing to me. Here we have a PDF, and if we just an Excel sheet, we're just moving around and we suddenly see it's not that easy to find this, Major. And we go, well, I don't see anything in that cell. What if I just, change the text color? Suddenly we can see things. What if I go, okay, Zoom's in the way. Excuse me, Zoom. There we go. What about sheet 3? Sheet 3, again, looks completely blank, but let's apply the good old Control A, red highlight. We got something here. If we copy it, this looks like base 64. It's a bit hard to tell if you don't know it, but it is base 64. Once again, I rely on the power of the internet, base 64 to ASCII, base 64 decode, paste, decode, and now we have a location. We can just copy the entire thing into here, someplace, somewhere, and there is our answer. Now, for the last one, it is a bit tricky because it does make you think that you've missed something, that you've overlooked something. Did anyone get this last one? Some people have got it. Excellent. So with this last one, we have to think what could be the probable command and control domain. So does anyone here want to tell me what a command and control domain is?
more like a bot that runs tasks for you. Like if you are doing a DDoS or any kind of attack, you use a CNC. Even for ransomware, you
Yeah.
can have a CNC server which will just keep sending packets or payloads to the attack to the victim machine.
Yeah, perfect. So basically a CNC or CNC sender, CNC server, whatever you're using, will send out instructions to your bots, your commands, your whatever you've got running. It is where you have the commands coming in and the responses coming back. So if we think about it, if I was some malicious attacker, right, what kind of domains do I have access to? If I'm lucky, I might have, pirated a few or be piggybacking on someone else's. But in this case, we only have a few domains that's popped up. In fact, if we think back to our email, we only have the attacker's domain, the attacker's email, our email, and the spoof domain. Of them, we can assume that's not coming from us. So it's either going to be the attacker's spoofed email or the attacker's actual email or the domain. The probable one, however, is probably going to be the reply to one. Why? Because the reply to is actually receiving traffic. It is looking for responses. That is why it's listed as the reply to. And from that, we can make an educated guess that this is probably going to be the CNC domain. Now, of course, it'll be hard to know for certain unless you can interact with it. If this was a real life scenario, you would try disabling that, you'd try blocking it, you'd see if it has any effect on the attack. And if it does, you've hit the jackpot. But in this case, we can only take an educated guess and then complete the lab. So with that is the last lab we'll plan to deny. I did have a third lab in case we had extra time. If you would like to have a go at it, it is called log analysis compromised WordPress. I will preface this by saying this one can be very tedious, particularly if you have no experience with website development or in particular WordPress. If you do attempt it in your own time, I strongly recommend the use of Control F. It will save you years of time and also just doing quick Google searches